Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome back to Just a Jet. Today I'm bringing you a video that I had teased in my 10 favorite historical costumes of 2020 video, which I can link above and below, and that is talking about my fashion icons. But before we get into them, please don't forget to like and subscribe. So when I teased the initial video, I was talking about Princess Diana, who I said was one of my fashion icons, so we might as well start there, since I already kind of talked about her in another video. So Princess Diana really is still a fashion icon. Obviously when her height of her fashion was in the 80s, early 90s, and she wore pieces very typical for that. She wore a lot of bright colors, bright patterns, which I really love. Even though I'm not really into 80s fashion, I do love bright, bold patterns. So that I was definitely attracted to that in her style. She definitely literally wore her heart on her sleeve. Like, she was very, whether it was intentional or not, she really like conveyed what she was going through the clothes she wore, like the revenge dress and the like black sheep sweater that she wore. And she really pushed even though everything she wore was like really gorgeous, she really pushed the boundaries for what was appropriate for someone in the royal family to wear, which was very regimented, and you know, she was very relatable from not even just what she wore, but her personality. Definitely in juxtaposition to a very cold or seemingly cold royal family. So all of that together like really shaped her style and how people looked at her and her style. One thing that by like kind of looking at her style that seems to keep coming up is the idea that she wore her clothes didn't wear her. And this is in the 80s, this is in the 80s. So, you know, clothes were very loud, very overpowering, but it didn't happen really with her. Like, she was always the centerpiece of everything that she wore, and the clothes all came secondary. And that's really hard to say, especially in the time she was living, because like I said, the clothes were pretty outrageous in the 80s, and that just showed like how like control she really had over her style and like how she felt and everything. And yeah, I just think she really owned everything that she wore. And maybe that was because she had a lot of other issues that she was dealing with, and maybe that was something that she could express herself and control in her life. So with all that being said, she was very much relatable. She was very much the people's princess. And yeah, and like a lot of that kind of translated into her style. Even though she had gorgeous, gorgeous gowns and, you know, really notable designers dressed her and all that, like even her like casual side was very relatable, put together and cute, and always very her. She seemed to always like have a lot of input. I think she liked fashion and style, so I think she always had a lot of input to what she wore, and she cared about it. And obviously, like I said, with some of the more notable items that kind of told like what she was going through, obviously, subconsciously or not, their thought was put into that. The next icon I'm going to talk about probably won't come as a big surprise, because I feel like she's on everybody's list, and that is Audrey Hepburn. Now, I do feel though, even though I just said that she's pretty much on everyone's list, I do feel like people that are interested in vintage inspired fashion can usually fall into the Marilyn Monroe camp or the Audrey Hepburn camp. And I am definitely an Audrey for sure. Though I can respect Marilyn Monroe's style, I'm definitely an Audrey girl. But in that case, not everything that Audrey Hepburn is really my style, but she wore a lot of like, especially her most notable things, she wore a lot of black. I don't mind black, but I definitely like prefer color and patterns. But she made everything she wore was so timeless. Like things that she wore, you know, in her heyday, you could walk out in the street today and wear it, and people wouldn't bat an eye. It's still stylish and it's still timeless. I mean, I guess you could say it was because she wore it. I don't know, or it's just because it always was a timeless thing to wear. That's, I guess, debatable. But some of the pieces that she wore like the Baidu, is that how you say it, or Batu neckline, a lot. And that was in sweaters, in formal wear, just that long, and it opened and closed at the same time. At the shoulder points, that like high collar, that's a look that I really like. And I love collars of any kind, anything that's kind of an untraditional collar. Obviously, like I'm wearing an example today, but like that's kind of a different, I mean, it's not flashy, but it's different. It's kind of a non-traditional collar for a shirt. So, or a dress or whatever. So I like that. She wore that a lot. That was one piece I really like. I love her like slim pants look with the ballerina slippers or the ballet slippers. That is one of her biggest kind of looks on the casual side, and it's something that I've always liked. And then on the more formal side, of course, her like pearl necklaces and her gloves. Those have been iconic since Breakfast at Tiffany's, and they continue to be, and they're just nice to like put into other looks. Obviously maybe not as formal as if she's walking around in front of Tiffany's in the movie. But yeah, again, it's always pieces of things that you like. And putting those kind of into different outfits make your own style that you were inspired by other people. The next person I'm going to talk about is a classic American fashion icon, and that's Jackie O, also known as Jacqueline Kennedy. And as the First Lady, I feel like she really fit the bill as far as her style, especially kind of saying yes and no. I'm kind of like agreeing and disagreeing with what I just said. We'll go from the agreeing side. So from her like kind of like public appearance and like all the public appearances that she had to make, her suits are gorgeous. Obviously the most famous one was the all pink with the pink pill hat, which on its own separated, she wore on the day her husband was killed, but separated from that tragedy, like on its own, is a gorgeous suit. Beautiful. She had so many gorgeous suits. A lot of fun cuts and patterns for the time anyway. But that, I just love that style. And I don't have anything like that. I don't even know if I want anything like that really, but I love looking at them. I think they're gorgeous. I appreciate them in the time that they were. And hey, if I found the right one, I definitely would wear it. I'm all about, you know, I don't care about dressing non-traditionally. But yeah, that was a big thing. Like her suits were gorgeous. And of course, those were a little bit more forward-facing in her public-facing life. And then on the other side of that, where I disagree, is that her casual wear was very basic. Like, and when I say basic, I mean basics. Like she had mastered basics. Like it's very interesting to me that even at that time, somebody, the average American, could go into their closet and dress like Jackie O from the casual standpoint. She loved like the trench coat and button-down shirts. Like, you know, that wasn't hard to find. Most people had those in their closets at the time. Something I like about Jackie O's style is that your style doesn't have to be one thing. You know, like her public-facing wardrobe, while I'm sure she loved both, like was very different from her like casual everyday outfits. And that's something I feel like people kind of, and me included, I think can be try to put yourself in a box that you like, but you know, you can have many boxes and different boxes on different days. So I think Jackie O kind of like showed me that, like, because her style can differentiate greatly whenever she wants, and I think we should all have that be the same way. The next fashion icon I'm going to talk about is a fictional one, and that's Betty Draper from Mad Men. Side note, if you haven't seen Mad Men yet, and it's been over for a while, like you definitely need to watch it. It's an amazing show, regardless. But it also has no shortage of vintage-inspired fashion. I mean, every character has their own personal fashion, just like everyone does every other point in time. So there's a lot to see, and then also as the years pass, people's personal style changes. So there's always like fresh style coming into the show. So it's a beautiful show to look at, and also obviously the storylines are very good. It wouldn't have stayed on otherwise for as long as it did. So Betty Draper is like, okay, let me say, the other people I've talked about, I've liked pieces. I've liked pieces I can take and like make my own style. Betty Draper, like, her aesthetic is like, I would dress like her every day. Like, her aesthetic is perfect. I love it. She wears a lot of A-line dresses, which is my favorite, like, dress. My favorite thing to wear is an A-line dress. Like, pinched at the waist, you can maybe put, like, a petticoat underneath or not. Like, you know, you change the style of it that way. And she just wears those. It was for the time, obviously. Her character is living in mid-century, so it was very normal, and I know that's what you wore every day, but I love that style of dress. And so she wears a lot of those, so I love almost everything she wears. And then also, she wears a lot of really fun, like, patterns and styles of the dresses, so that's another thing I love. So if you put a really fun pattern and style on an A-line dress, that's probably going to be a hit for me. So I just love everything she wears. And obviously she wears a lot of vintage jewelry that I really love. For her character, it's not vintage. It's just what you wore during the, you know, on the daily. Betty Draper, definitely my aesthetic. The most out of anyone I've talked about so far. Love everything she wears and how she wears it, and it's just very, very me. So let's move on to the second fictional character that I look at as a fashion icon, and that is Gossip Girl's Blair Waldorf. I missed the boat on Gossip Girl. I only recently binged it, and kind of like understood what everybody was talking about for all those years, but I something that captured me the most about the whole show was two things. One, the breakfast spreads in that show. I'm a breakfast person. I love breakfast. And the breakfast spreads I had every day before school were insane. I mean, I just looking at everything was crazy. So that I always looked forward to. And then, of course, Blair's style, which is amazing. You can definitely describe Blair's style as like preppy, polished, and girly. It definitely changes throughout the seasons, obviously, because she's a teenager when it starts, and you know she grows up throughout the seasons. In the first couple seasons, or the early seasons, she definitely leans heavy into like the preppy look. Obviously, they wear uniforms at school, and so she wears a lot of like ties. This is where the headbands are very big, and I love headbands too. So I've always loved her headbands. I do love blazers, so like those like kind of collegiate blazers, kind of boarding school like type looking blazers is a look I really think is really cool. She leans really heavy into that the earlier seasons. The bright tights, which she would never be able to wear at a uniform school, like a school with uniforms. But I think they're fun, and I like bright tights. So those are like the things I really like about her style on the earlier seasons. As they leave high school and she kind of like moves on, I really like her capes and her cloaks, basically. Like I have a few of them. I don't have a lot, but I think they're so cool looking. She has a lot of cool ones. And her bows, like I love bows, and she really leans heavily into bows for a long time. Love those. She's always wearing bright, bold patterns, bright colors, and of course, like I've mentioned that several times, like that's a pattern for me that I pay attention to people that wear stuff like that, because I also like that type of aesthetic. So yeah, and her clothing is very heavily, especially a little bit later on, like after she gets out of high school, there's a lot of vintage inspiration, obviously, in her clothes, which is a whole nother reason I like it. She's very vintage inspired, but there's always like a modern twist to it. So I think that's why her style, though, while there's a lot of throwback to it, was so mainstream and popular on the show with kids watching. There definitely was a twist to it. But of course, I'm very drawn to the vintage inspired part of it. So those are all of the fashion icons I'm going to talk about today. Obviously, for me, they're all heavily vintage inspired, if not living in mid-century. So obviously that's my aesthetic, that's what I like. So those are the icons that I would gravitate to. I enjoy watching like some like the old episodes and movies they're in, or whatever the character was in, and enjoying the outfits, looking at pictures and all that. So yeah, those are all people that I like to take bits from and try to put them in my own style, because that's the whole thing. You never emulate one person's style completely. You always kind of take pieces. So except for Betty Draper, I don't know. If I could like just copy and paste her style, I might do it. But for the most part, you just like kind of take pieces. And again, you can have a Betty Draper feel one day, and a Blair Waldorf feel on one day, and a Jackie O casual on another day. You don't have to put yourself in a box. But yeah, so that's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.